Welcome to Iron Summit, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of becoming your best self, blending expert insights on strength training, smart recovery, optimal nutrition, and mindset mastery to help you elevate your game.
What's up, guys? If you're looking to level up your training, click the link in the description and check out the Iron Summit Gains Emporium. Our strength training plans are designed to help you pack on muscle, and with our software, you can track every workout right from your phone. Plus, you'll have direct access to us for any questions along the way. Don't just train, level up your training.
We're live.
We're live.
Is that a Ponderosa hat?
No.
That's kind of looks like the Pondo P.
Pioneer, bro. You just, come on.
Yeah, that's true.
You just sent me this. Ryan asked me about these belts, I think, yesterday.
Yeah, I did.
Let's
Great
give
belts.
Pioneer a shout out, because
Shout out Pioneer. Would love to work with you guys. Big fans.
Leathercraft, everyone. Best weightlifting belt you can get. We've talked about this before, but any belt that's skinnier in the front than the back is a waste of your time. Got to be equal thickness all the way around. Like, it doesn't effectively brace the core.
So actually, I know we've kind of touched on this, but curious, before we start this awesome topic today, what are your thoughts on when do you start wearing a belt? Like, is that 85% of your max, 80%, 90%, 95%?
For me, it's so much more nuanced than that. It depends on what my split is, what my training volume is. Do I want to tax my erectors and core in that exercise? So for me, it's not like a percentage. It's like, for example, in the program I'm doing right now, I have a hamstring day and then a glute day like 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
In the hamstring day, I'm doing heavy RDLs.
Yeah, you don't want to mess your back up for that.
Yes, I want to target my hamstrings. I'm not doing it's not even heavy RDLs. RDLs for sets of 10. It's not even close to 85%, but I'm wearing a belt for those because then 3 days later, I'm deadlifting, like conventional deadlifting for glutes. And then I'm wearing a belt again in that, because if I were to wear no belt, I'd just be taxing the crap out of my erectors and not hitting the targeted muscle groups. Now, if I were to say I'm trying to get stronger at like a 1 rep max conventional pull, probably not wearing a belt at that to try and tax my erectors at that.
Yeah.
That weight range. So I think it's kind of, you got to use your brain a little bit, I guess. It's my not very helpful answer.
No, I actually think that was a really good nuanced answer. I used to be not very against, but try to very much not use belts and like wrist wraps for, whether you're doing maybe an RDL or, some kind of back day exercise where your grip's obviously going to die before your back. But I'm kind of coming around to the fact that I think that stuff's valuable. There's a place and time, or a time and place for it. And to your point, I think it kind of depends what your ultimate goal is and what your overall training cycle is going to look like. My only thing is, I don't do a lot of direct grip work, talking more like strap stuff, that I feel like it's important to get that through, deadlifts, RDLs, back stuff, whatever.
For sure.
But at the same time, I do see the value in it. And then the one thing I want to avoid with belts, I think sometimes people use it as a crutch to have like crappy technique and get a couple extra reps when they technically fail. Yes. So trying to avoid that and not do like the CrossFit, I'm going to get 20 reps on this when you should only probably get 15.
Whoa. Let's get Josh. No, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's the same thing for wrist wraps. Like, I actually, like wrestlers, for example, in season, I think should be lifting with wraps, like wrist wraps, as much as they can, because wrestling is so much tax on your grip. If you're then also lifting, you're just going to be overtraining your grip. So I think it can kind of be a little counterintuitive sometimes, but in the off season, you're trying to get stronger. You're not wrestling quite as much. Then don't lift with straps, lift without them.
I always remember once you switch from freestyle back to folk style in preseason, those first hard, you do an hour of top goes, bottom goes, my wrists would be on fire after that. My forearms were lit up.
Yeah. That was the number. You get done with the match and your forearms are just
pumped
out, just completely pumped out. Wrestling is you and I have talked about this a bunch, but wrestling is a grip strength has got to be one of the most important factors in terms of strength in wrestling. It's the touch point. You can scare someone with that grip strength if you got
The only other sport that I can think of that it's probably more it's important off the top of my head is like rock climbing, but definitely probably one of the most functional muscles you can have too is having a strong grip.
for sure.
And it's something you can definitely train. There's some people that just have big hands that naturally have very good grips, but I think it's a good segue into today's topic, how to get jacked, a no BS blueprint.
Yeah, this is a great topic. One of
Fun,
my favorite topics.
fun topic. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
how to get jacked, how to put on muscle mass, essentially.
Well, and I think the funny thing about this is not to sound like a broken record, but it's kind of all roads lead to Rome. The first thing is nutrition. You got to be in a calorie surplus.
Energy balance, the base of the pyramid, which we did for episode 100. It's like the foundation of all things health, but definitely the foundation of how to get jacked.
100%.
I would say when I get this question like, dude, how do you get big? How do I put on muscle mass? How do I grow my legs? Like whatever the question is, it's like, okay, first thing we're going to look at is what are you eating?
Hmm.
And are you eating more in terms of calories than you're burning? And it's that energy balance. And so like we'll get more into the nuance of that, but like I want to set the foundations first. That is foundation number one. Is the energy balance at least in, neutral, which isn't great for adding muscle mass, or in a surplus? Because one thing that is really, really hard to do slash impossible is adding muscle tissue in a deficit.
Yeah.
You can maybe increase your lean, or you can increase your like fat-free mass index by like reducing your body fat and very slowly adding muscle tissue in a very slight deficit. I'll like caveat that is possible. But if you're talking about like actually adding muscle mass, you got to be in a significant amount of muscle mass. You got to be in a surplus. Number
Yeah.
one,
Yeah. We're splitting hairs there. If you're going to be in a calorie deficit, it's not really a long term blueprint. And unless you're, taking some other stuff. Um, but a good rule of thumb here is like 250 to 500 calorie surplus daily. You don't need to get fluffy, but it's important to eat over what you're burning. And I think a big caveat to that is like make sure you're adjusting for your activity level. I know for a long time, especially even, maybe 2 years ago, right as I got done wrestling, I was coaching where I was wrestling every day the same, if not more, because I didn't have to recover for competitions. It's you really got to get in front of that activity level because if you're doing a bunch of stuff, especially if you're some kind of endurance athlete, like you got to out eat what you're training. So you got to adjust that. And I think most people usually have the other issue where maybe you don't have a lot of steps and you'd probably have some benefit from having a little bit more activity level. But there are definitely, especially athletes we're talking to, you're probably under eating. Make sure you're adjusting for activity level with this surplus.
for sure. I think another thing in that surplus, and to quote one of my all-time favorites, Paul Quinn, is the quality of the food equals the quality of the muscle mass.
Mm,
So just to touch on it, because I know some people like to dirty bulk or eating these crazy surpluses and eat crappy foods and pizza and hamburgers for your bulking. Not that you can't have a pizza and a hamburger every once in a while, but in general, you want to have for optimal muscle gain, you only need a 10 to 15% surplus. There's actually some really interesting studies and science on this. There's a 2023 study, I think done by Helms. We'll give them credit. Whoever Helms is, good job. But they looked at different cohorts. One was a group at maintenance calories. One was a group at like a 10 to 15% surplus, and one was a group at a 15% plus surplus. And basically, what they found is that the two surplus groups gained way more muscle mass than the maintenance over 8 weeks, 3 times a week, heavy hypertrophy training. But the two surplus groups, there was really no additional muscle mass gain in the 15% or more caloric surplus than the 10 to 15% surplus. It was just fat mass. So if you're looking to like add muscle tissue, make sure you're in that surplus, but you don't need to be in a insane surplus.
yeah.
Really, you're just going to get fat and add muscle, which then if you want to like look good again or if you want to stay athletic, like, or if you're going to make a weight class at the end of the season, whatever it is, you're going to have to lose all that fat mass again anyway, which is additional work. And then you're probably gonna have to go in a deficit, which might impact your muscle mass. So for net muscle mass gain, it's good to be in like a good conservative moderate surplus. You can push that higher at times. And like you also, as you gain muscle mass and you eat more food, your metabolism revs up, you might need to slowly move your calories up, but you don't need to be in these crazy surpluses. Like all of the findings and data are big surpluses. Really, they're not very good for you, hurt your insulin sensitivity, all this stuff, and they're not more effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing here too is, I mean, if you're eating truly clean foods here for most of your meals, this should feel like a lot of food. Like
Yeah,
most
you're gonna
people
slog through it.
well, most people I talk to that like actually go on a bulk where they're like eating rice and beef and, chicken and potatoes, they're like, it's so much food. Where if you're just eating crap, you'll still be hungry. So you should be probably at least towards the end of your bulk. This should feel a little bit like a chore eating this much and having to plan your meals and getting it down. If you're doing this the right way and the quality, it'll make a huge difference in how you feel, how you recover, how you perform, how it flows through your system. You're not messing up your gut microbiome as much because it's tough on your body. This is you're processing a lot more food. Your body's, a factory that is working overtime to get through all this food and trying to shuttle those resources to the right areas. So yeah, I mean it's your body's a temple, put the right things in it and that's that. And the other thing I think when we're talking about a surplus is just like you don't want a yo-yo diet when you're in a deficit, you don't want a yo-yo diet a surplus. Like it's really hard to, if you're like really shallow on calories one day and then you do, 10,000 calories the next day and then you go back to 2,000 the next day and you're just bouncing up and down. Your body does a lot better when it has like a predictable routine. Try to, obviously, every day is going to be a little different in terms of activity level. You're not going to eat exactly the same foods unless you're a robot. And, maybe that's the best thing you can do, but probably not realistic. Make sure that you're like hitting around, a small delta between what you're eating in terms of total calories and kind of macronutrient breakdown instead of these large swings up and down, because it's going to make it a lot easier.
Great. Yeah, great points. I also want to touch on just some like practical tips for eating in that surplus. Like one, to do that, you need to have some understanding of what your maintenance calories are. There's a lot of great calculators out there. You can go online, reach out to us. We'll tell you. We'll give a free offer right now. We'll put it in our calculator and give you what like an estimate for your kind of basic caloric needs are, and then you can go off of that. Really, the only way to truly get accurate with this is do it and then see whether you're gaining weight or not.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of it. The second thing is you probably have to have some understanding of what you're eating, and we can get into macros on that and food timing, but you need to have basic understanding of those two things to really be able to effectively judge whether or not you're in a surplus. And then some practical tips. These are things that I've done, worked for me, used it over a long period of time to, I think, add some good muscle mass.
I
But
think so.
one, eat first thing in the morning.
Yeah. It's
If
good.
you get behind on your eating, you're playing catch up all day. I know it sucks, but you eat earlier in the morning, you get that first meal in, it revs your metabolism, you're hungrier throughout the day. That's a huge one.
Can't
Find what
eat
you
all day
like,
if you don't start in the morning.
100%. Find what you like and eat it in the morning. I'm on eggs, chocolate milk, sourdough right now.
That's a
That's
good
my
that's a
morning. That's my morning combo. Feel good.
coffee. Don't forget the coffee in
Coffee.
there.
100% coffee. Like that was a given. That's like, so tip number one, eat in the morning. Tip number two, eat foods that are healthy, whole foods, but are palatable to me. And it can be different for everyone else. But I think in general, like ground beef or a good quality red meat is much more palatable than trying to like force feed yourself chicken breast. I know, Ryan, you like chicken. I like chicken at times too, but
Why did
I'm
you
in a
say that like it's a negative? Yeah, I'll eat chicken. I like animal products.
but
I'm
if
not
you're in a
saying chicken's
big
better than beef. I will
if
never
you're in a
say that.
big surplus, for me at least, it's hard. Like here's like, okay, a
Yeah, I'll take a
practical tip.
ribeye. Thank
For
you.
me, it's like I'm not like yes, I get to eat chicken. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm gonna have beef. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Like,
I agree. I agree.
so red meat is for me a huge cheat code here. Plus, a lot of those fats are really good in red meat. And you
Mhm.
get a little bit more of them. Then the other one for me, because if you're trying to add muscle tissue, some of the more voluminous starchy carbs, while they're still really good carbs, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, you have to eat a ton of those to get a lot of carbs. The ones that are a little denser but still really high quality carbs help me in a surplus. And for me, that's white rice and oats. Those are a little denser in terms of calories. They're still really high quality carb sources and help me stay in a surplus when I need. If you look at just the size of the portion, if you eat 100 grams of carbs of rice versus 100 grams of carbs of sweet potato, it's like 3 times as much volume for the sweet potato.
Yeah.
So something to be like, that's just a real practical advice on food volume is beef, rice, oats. Make those staples of your diet. You'll eat more food. Listen up. Ryan and I, we're not usually big fans of pre-workouts. As Ryan and I have discussed a lot in the past, they're either usually full of shit, way underdosed on the good stuff, and overdosed on the stim. Thankfully for us, we have had our prayers answered. Code Nutra just launched their all natural organic pre workout called Code Nectar. If Ryan and I were to design a pre workout, this would be it. 150 milligrams of caffeine from natural sources, green tea and guarana, beetroot extract for the vasodilation, and L-theanine to smooth all that out. Best part, it's all delivered by honey and Redmond's real salt. That's a good pre-workout. Go get some. CodeNutra.com and use code IRON for 15% off.
Beef rice, Jesus Christ. All right. So that's I like those tips. A couple others that I would add to that is one, if you're eating a lot of fats, I think the easier way to, when I'm bulking, getting a lot of calories, and I feel like it's affecting my training, I like to stick to like 3 hours, big meal, 3 hours before training, maybe an hour before, have, 30, 60 grams of carbs. And then if I'm behind on calories, I'll have a big meal at night because I can go to bed with a full stomach, not overly full where it's messing up your sleep. But I think it's easier to get a lot of calories in at night when you don't have to move around and feel bad in your training. I don't want it to affect that window. So if I'm gonna have a high fat meal, like a big steak, probably do that at dinner. I'm not gonna do that at
Yeah,
lunch and then drag in my workout.
like a fatty steak, like a
Like
ribeye. Yeah,
yeah, like a ribeye, yeah, something like that. The other thing is when you are having issue getting stuff down, like if you're having an issue doing that, adding salt to your food makes it easier to eat, and then adding any kind of sauces. Like I was talking to my buddy the other day, he's like, "Oh, I'm having a tough time with rice." I'm like, "Dude, put some soy sauce on your rice. You'll be able to eat double the amount of rice. Like, don't just put whatever or just eat it plain. Like, you
yeah.
don't have to suffer through this.
No, make
Salt
it
your
taste
food,
good. Yeah,
salt it, sauces, all that stuff,
seasoning. I make my
seasoning.
ground beef. It's delicious.
It's
Like, I
good
love it.
stuff.
It's not plain ground beef. Like, just because we say eat whole foods doesn't mean don't season your whole foods. Like,
Right.
make it taste good.
Absolutely. And be careful with the sauces. Like, don't be taking a bunch of crappy sauces and stuff. But I mean,
And
this
don't
is
put
where you can get,
Chick-fil-A sauce on it.
hey, no Chick-fil-A slander in here, though, honestly. Come on.
I think this is a good practical tip is dry like any dry seasoning, so not a sauce, but a dry seasoning, 95% of the time, those are gonna have very, like, little caloric impact to your food, but can add a lot of palatability. Like, sauces is where you run into, like, some of the higher fat, lower quality stuff. Dry seasonings, um, those usually do not have caloric content. They're just spices and salt.
Yeah. And I would say, like, maybe this is a hot take, but a lot of the like low calorie sauces have a bunch of crap in them in terms of like stuff for your gut. So be careful about getting like a bunch of low calorie, zero sugar sauces that you can just taste they're off and they have a lot of like artificial stuff in it. Like salsa and mustard are two great sauces that are like
Cheat
very
code.
clean, very good. We're not talking about cutting, but very clean sauces.
Yeah.
And then if you're struggling with calories, add some liquid calories. And I'm not saying just eat a bunch of crap, but liquid, it's a lot easier to drink stuff down when you're really full and you can
For
get a
sure.
lot of calories drinking. Like when I'm bulking, I'll add 2 glasses of milk a day. Such an easy way to get an extra couple hundred calories, and then I don't have to change my nutrition a significant amount. Um,
Yeah.
I think those are all the tips that I got on top of yours, but just some practical stuff for
Yeah, I
getting
think
those
those are
calories in.
practical ways to get into a surplus and, uh, and stay there. Again, kind of you're gonna have to figure out what a surplus means for you and, look at that. The last one I will say for adding muscle tissue is you definitely need carbs. Like protein and fats are super important. You should still be eating like at least a pound per pound of lean body mass of protein. Probably can go up to like 1.5 to 2 grams of protein if you're really trying to add muscle tissue, but you got to eat your carbs. And particularly for adding muscle tissue, the most important time is post training.
Mhm.
The most anabolic hormone we have in our body is not testosterone, it's insulin. And so if you can modulate that insulin and get the insulin spike when your body is in an anabolic state, so post training, you're going to seriously improve your nutrient partitioning and shuttle kind of what you're eating towards muscle mass. So getting that insulin spike using fast digesting carbs post workout is another way to kind of enhance the effect of your surplus.
Yeah, that's where the gym bro gummy worms after workouts came from. There's some real
Yeah,
science behind that.
there is. Sugar is just, it's a carb. It's a very fast digesting carb, hits the bloodstream right away, particularly glucose, like right away. Doesn't need to be processed by the liver, hits hard, spikes your blood sugar. I like using like higher quality sources of really fast digesting carbs. Fruits are awesome. It is fructose, so it does get processed by your liver. So it's a little slower than just pure glucose, but it is still very fast digesting. My favorite post workout, need carbs, also super dense volume wise, raisins.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
Super high in sugar content, spike that insulin. Do some raisins with a good high quality protein. Great post workout snack there.
Thought you were gonna just take a shot of honey. That's kinda where I thought you
Honey's
were
good.
going with that.
Honey's really good. He's really good. Maybe you could put some honey on your raisins.
There you go. I think that covers it for the nutrition. Next one, not that we need to touch on this a crazy amount, but obviously super important is proper rest and recovery when you're bulking too. You gotta make sure you're recovering. Part of that's the nutrition part, and then, the other part is sleeping, making sure you're following a good program, making sure you're, doing the right things, getting some movement outside of the gym and not just, going and hitting heavy legs and sitting down for 8 hours.
Yep. I think, like, from a general perspective, for adding muscle tissue, recovery is more important than your training. Like, that's the nature of adding muscle tissue is you're hitting the training in the gym, which we'll get into in a second. But then you are recovering from that training and allowing your body to not only rebuild the damage you did, but add new tissue on top of that. So it's like a recovery demand plus some.
Yeah.
So recovery is so big. Obviously, food is one of the biggest things you can do in recovery, which we just talked about. But yes, sleep. Sleep is huge from a recovery standpoint, from a hormone perspective. It's one of the most anabolic things you can do is sleep well.
And something that I have recently, like within the last week, tried to do that I actually think makes a huge difference. That podcast I sent you where I think it's Brian Johnson, he's kind of the crazy longevity guy that
Yeah.
spends,
Live
tens
forever,
of
dude.
millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But he was talking about like get your HRV down right before bed.
Huge.
And I'd never thought about sleep like that, where it's like, yeah, obviously you need to wind down, try not to be on your phone, try not to, have a bunch of thoughts racing. But I think if you can really get some kind of calming ritual right before you go to bed, whether that's like, just laying down, doing, I don't know, if meditation, breath work, or reading a
Reading.
book, something to get your mind off of, the problems you worked on throughout the day. Going to bed in that kind of mental state, I think I've felt like just recently I've
Huge.
had such better sleep like that. And it's such an easy thing to do. Like if you have to talk about your week with your wife, like maybe don't save it for 9:30 right before you go to bed. Like talk about it at
Get
dinner. You know what I'm saying?
anabolic.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Tell your
just
wife, look, I'm trying to be anabolic. Talk about this at 8 p.m.
I will talk to you at 7 a.m. I am in sleepy mode, but kind of tongue in cheek. But seriously, they're like, if
That's
you can
true.
really wind down and get good at detaching from the day's stressors, your recovery is so much better. Your cortisol responses are better. Um, it's huge for your recovery.
Yep. You heard it here. Reading books is anabolic.
That's true. Yep. Put
It
that
is.
put that on a bumper sticker.
I read for the anabolic effects.
Whatever you got to tell yourself. Next one. So basically,
This
how
is
your training's going, like
Yeah,
what
this is
you're
the
doing in
fun
training.
part, and I would say that point 1 energy balance, caloric surplus, and point 2 recovery are the most important.
Yeah,
Kind of
for
if
sure.
you could be lifting in the gym like pretty much a dickhead and get some serious muscle gains if you're doing point 1 and point 2 correctly.
Like 20, what, 14 max? What was your
20 That was 2010.
2010
I was
max?
freaking jacked, and I was lifted like a dickhead, but I was eating good food and recovering pretty well.
You also had probably the most anabolic testosterone time when you're going through puberty and growing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you combine that with all of it, it goes well. But no, this is like the fun part because this is where everyone thinks all the gains are made. And like you got to be training, like doing some kind of training to add muscle tissue. Some kind of resistance training is really effective. Now you can optimize that, and that's what we're going to talk about, like how to optimize your lifting to add muscle tissue. And I think to just lay it out from, and we talked about this with Cooper, but it's kind of the scale. I think N1, who's I work with as a coach, they developed this scale. I think it's probably the most accurate way to look at your training in terms of lifting and the effects it's going to have. You have basically on the far left, you have neurological stimulus, which is training for just pure strength. That's really not, you're not getting many adaptations in the muscle tissue itself. It's all in like how efficiently you're signaling your muscles to fire in those motor neurons. And that's like powerlifting specific type training. That's like less than, these are generalizations, but less than 5 reps, right? And then in the middle, so like let's say 5 to, I'll go as high as like 20, 25 reps. That's hypertrophy stimulus. You are now, through that kind of training, you are driving adaptations in the actual muscle tissue, which is your red cells, your muscle tissue. That's where the growth happens. Then you get above that, and there's different ways to slide the scale as well, but we'll just use reps for right now for simplicity's sake. You get above that, you're doing more metabolic stimulus, you're driving adaptations in your metabolic system. You're not going to get much muscle growth as you go kind of all the way to the right in the metabolic. So it goes neurological, hypertrophy, metabolic, but today we're focused right in the middle on hypertrophy and kind of how to maximize that. At Iron Summit, we are about getting everything we can out of our workouts and everyday lives. If you aren't wearing a pair of barefoot or wide toe box trainers, you are leaving gains on the table. The Sashi Athletics Ronin Ichi Minimalist Trainer is a perfect barefoot shoe. Not only does it perform like other major brands on the market, it is actually good looking. Even my wife says so. Get a pair today for 10% off with the code IronSummit10. Link is in the bio.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't listened to the one we recently did with Cooper, I think he makes a great point here where, some people are like, "Oh, it's not hypertrophy unless you're doing, over 10 reps or over 12 reps."
Yeah,
I
there's
think
no
there's no perfect line here, and I think it's important to, like, another caveat to hypertrophy is, or I guess just training in general, is the novel stimulus part is important, and if you're used to doing a certain type of training, it's important to change it up every once in a while. And I'm not saying don't get good at movements, don't, follow a training plan for 8 weeks or whatever, but it is important here to switch these training plans up so that you're doing different things and your body's getting some kind of like novel stimulus to it. Because you feel it, when you're doing the same training plan
stop
after,
getting
you know,
sore. You like, yeah, you feel good. That
and
usually
then you're
means
like,
you've been in it too long
yeah.
when it
Yeah, you're
starts.
like, I'm not getting sore off this. I'm not feeling, not that sore is the best, but it's an indicator to
For
think about.
hypertrophy, it's a pretty dang good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's an important point for sure.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, let's. just to touch on that real quick, like my single goal right now is to add muscle tissue. I want to compete in bodybuilding, literally like remove all athletic responsibilities, just get as big as possible. And even then, I will switch to a metabolic phase and do like conditioning work for 2 weeks just to get out of a hypertrophy stimulus for a little bit. So then I'm sensitive to hypertrophy again.
Yeah.
Like you have to take these things into consideration. If you just try and lift hypertrophy all year round, all the time, you are not going to add muscle tissue as much as if you did hypertrophy 3/4 of the year and then change up your stimulus at other points in time. So yeah, you got to change the stimulus.
Yeah, it is amazing just to think about at a high level how well the human body adapts to things. If you're doing the same thing consistently, your body's going to make those changes happen so that you're efficient at that. And you're trying to make your body less efficient so that it has to work harder to like achieve those results in a certain sense. Like obviously you don't want to be so inefficient at something that you're not getting the stimulus, but you want to make it hard on your body. You don't want your body to just be like, okay, I know I got to be able to
I
do
can
this every
handle that.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you were training to, uh,
Run a
like
marathon.
run a marathon or bench 225 as many times as possible, the easier that gets for you, the better it is. But for the goal of adding new muscle tissue, it's a little bit inverse. Like the whole trick to this game is your body wants to maintain a status quo and you're
Mhm.
tricking it to add more muscle tissue. And to do that, you have to continually force your body to adapt, which means not staying in the same program for too long because then you're just eventually your body gets really good at that program. You stop adapting, or the adaptations become smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. I mean, this is like anything in life. You gotta get out of your comfort zone to grow. Like if you stay doing the exact same things every single day at work, you might get really good at that task, but then, AI comes in and you lose a job because you're good at one thing. Like you gotta be able to be looking outside and doing different things. If you just do your multiplication tables every day, you're really good at multiplication, but now let's do
Yep.
calc. Let's go
Yeah.
do trigonometry. Like it's you gotta push the boundaries here.
Yep. So now let's talk about in hypertrophy, what that means. This is a pretty good generalization. Again, this is a generalization, and hypertrophy can happen at 2 reps, it can happen at 100 reps. But in general, hypertrophy does happen in a pretty wide variety of reps. It's like 30% of your 1 rep max for that would be a lot of reps to like all the way up to like 85, 90% of your 1 rep max for pretty low reps. 90% is probably you're looking at like 3 or 4 reps at most. But hypertrophy happens in that range, which good news is that means you can do a whole bunch of different things to induce hypertrophy. And then the last kind of key point on this is your muscles grow when they are being taxed pretty close to failure. Like failure is important for hypertrophy. Doesn't matter the weight. You could be doing a set of 30 with a lighter weight, as long as you're like really pushing those last 3 reps, or inverse, like a set of 5 where you're really pushing the last 3 reps. If you're training very close to failure or to failure, not too often. There's a fine balance to that, but at least a good amount, maybe 1 set per exercise. That's kind of where the magic in hypertrophy happens. And it also doesn't matter, like the weight you move doesn't matter. You can make that failure happen through tempo, through half reps, through pausing in the length and position. Like as long as you make it feel hard, hypertrophy is happening, which is pretty cool. And I'll get into why I think that's cool. But that is the important thing with hypertrophy. It has to feel really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is like that's a great point. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat here, and there's a lot of different people online that'll tell you, some people are like, you got to hit this perfect rep range. Some people are like, try to only do one working set, do the minimum effective dose. I think the most important thing here, like you said, is there's got to be this kind of intensity. If you're just kind of getting through it and you're like, I could have done 5, 10 more reps, you're not hitting
You're
your
not going to grow
hypertrophy
your muscle
range.
mass. Yeah. That's why I think I like training for size. Is like it's the time in the gym where training really hard to failure is like that's the
That's a
that's
goal.
the way to do it.
Yeah,
Like for strength, that doesn't help.
right.
Not much. It's like for strength, you want to train to 9 RPE and control, like be explosive with the weight. And for me, that's like, I don't know, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
I want to like hurt during my sets, and that's
You want to
fun.
feel something.
Yeah.
I think the caveat here too is like if you're an athlete and you're in season, this isn't the type of training you should be doing. You
No,
should
it's
be
a
doing
bad
minimum
idea.
effective dose where you're maintaining muscle mass, you feel good, but you're not so sore for your work or for your sport.
You shouldn't be trying to add muscle mass in season. Yeah. Stay out of that. So one of the reasons I think, and we'll get into like how to even focus on hypertrophy a little bit more, but one of the reasons I like the fact that it doesn't matter the weight you're moving, it just matters how hard it feels, is there are a lot of things you can do to make it so you don't have to move as much weight all the time, which then you stay healthier
Yeah.
in general. So you can like do this in a way that's not really taxing you. That being said, I think there's something sometimes you just got to like move heavy weight close to failure in these hypertrophy rep ranges to get the stimulus, but it's all just different tools and there's
Yeah.
different ways you can do it. A couple of the big ones for me for lifting and hypertrophy, and these are the ones where I see most people go wrong. It's where ego lifting gets in the way of gains. It's the reason that frat boys are skinny. Is one, controlling the eccentric. The eccentric is like that is where the magic happens in terms of a lot of the muscle growth. The concentric as well is super important, but the eccentric, controlling that eccentric, slower tempos on the negative, and then you can kind of be more explosive in the concentric. It's actually probably the most hypertrophic combo is control the eccentric, move it hard in the
And
concentric.
this is such good to your point on ego lifting. This this sucks. Like you're gonna have to lighten the weight if you're truly doing eccentric reps. And so if you're like really worried about everybody watching you put up heavy weight, you're not gonna train like this. And
Yep.
but if you're really trying to put
But
on
you're going to
muscles
be
and have a
small for
long-term
life.
effect. Yeah. That's you gotta check the ego and yeah, that lightweight's gonna feel heavy because you're doing
Yep.
it this way.
Number two is get full range of motion, like really get that stretch. So if you control the eccentric, but you're only going halfway down, that's not really that cool, especially for muscle growth. But if you're controlling the eccentric and you're going all the way down, whatever the movement is, getting as much of a stretch, there's a lot of research on this. There's even some research that say you can train just in like the lengthened half of the movement and get close to the same muscle growth. I don't know. I think you can like it's a tool like anything else, but it's not like the only way to do it. But as a general rule of thumb, get in the stretch, really stress the muscle under as much load as you can effectively control. That is a really effective way to grow.
Yeah.
And sorry, one last thing is like there's like if you don't buy it like science-based lifting, just think common sense. What movements get you the most sore? Like a leg extension, if you did a whole workout of you did 10 by 10 German volume training on leg extensions, you're going to get maybe a little bit sore because that's all the shortened position of the quad. You do 10 by 10 squats, you're
Yeah,
going to
you're
be
sore.
wrecked
Yeah.
because you're training that lengthened portion of the muscle groups in the legs when you're squatting. You're getting at least some length and bias to everything. So that's like, and you can apply that to everything. You can do like, if you did like half flies versus full flies, you're going to get way more sore doing the full range of motion flies. Like it's just kind of common sense that this stretch equals tissue damage.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, like, lengthened partials have had a huge, I don't know, spotlight recently, and this is where, like, bro science kinda real science caught up to bro science a little bit where, no, if you're going, ass to grass squats, you're gonna be really sore from that, and so just take that common sense and now we have the science to back it up, like, that is a really important rep range or, range of motion that you need to be hitting if you're trying to put on muscle. It's just the shortest way to get there is, make sure you're going full range of motion, going, slow on the eccentric, and then concentric, you can, push it, explode up.
Yep.
But if you've ever trained this way, you know how much more sore you are from doing this. And you're like, okay, that makes sense.
And then I think if you're like now you were getting into really optimizing, like first just full range of motion, control the eccentrics, but you can start then looking at different positions of the muscle, like short and lengthened, and make sure you hit them all. Like you want to cover your bases, hit hack squats like super deep, and then go do leg extensions. Now you got it. You kind of got it all, right? And leg extensions also train like your rectus femoralis and more of a lengthened position. So it's like have variety, do all of it, control the eccentrics, and hit it at full range of motion, and check your ego at the door. Because what you really should have an ego about is being jacked, not how much weight
Put
you
it
can look
put
like
it
you
on
can.
the wall. I'm gonna start a
Yeah,
quote book with Max quotes.
not how much weight you look like you can move. Plus, if like you go into a gym where people really know what you're doing and you're half repping some dumbbells for bench,
Yeah,
no one cares. They're
right.
like that dude half repping. That's not
Yeah.
cool.
No, I agree. I do think the one maybe practical tip I'll add to this is use your ego in a good way where having a good training partner, I think you're going to have a more intense lift no matter what. And like, don't hurt yourself and do stupid stuff. But having someone there pushing you and, kind of feeding off of each other's energy and like finding somebody that trains really hard is a super motivating thing to kind of get after it, even when you don't feel good. And so I think I've always felt I get better workouts in when I got a training partner that's like intense with stuff and willing to push boundaries of things.
Yeah, and call
Um,
you out when you're half repping.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
be like, hey, man, you're going kind of quick on that eccentric. You're like, all right, I got to do, so I think having that is important if you can have that in your training. It's such an underrated cheat code to build more muscle.
yep, yeah. So yeah, check your ego at the door if you really want to grow. And guess what? If you train that way long enough, pretty soon, and this is where I think the real growth happens, is when you're moving heavy loads under full ranges with a slow eccentric. Now you're combining load with those things. Like you can earn it. You will get there. And then you get even more adaptation because you're moving heavier loads with that same kind of tempo and stretch. Like you got to just earn the ability to move the heavy weights in those ways.
Yeah, you'll get strong here. You just got to stick to it. It's the long-term vision for the best results.
Yep, exactly. The last thing, I mean, we kind of touched upon it with metabolic training, but I think it's also important. It is good to like if you're trying to add muscle tissue to also train heavy sometimes to change that stimulus. Like I do think it's good to like push those reps a little lower sometimes, move some heavier weight. You will be training a little bit more neurological. There is like the fast twitch muscle fibers are trained more in that neurological type stimulus. There's less fast twitch muscle fibers in your body in general, so you won't get as much muscle growth. But it's not going to completely stagnate you, and then you're changing that stimulus up. That's where having good programming, good coaching comes in, because a good coach is going to be undulating that periodization for you, switching between neurological, hypertrophy, metabolic, and balancing your goals, especially if it's growing muscle tissue, on how long to stay in each one of those.
Yeah, and I think a psychological like aspect of this too is it's super motivating when you do, these slow and controlled reps, you're doing lengthened positions, you're like really pushing your technique and trying to increase your weight each week and then you go try some heavier weights and you're like, wow, I actually got a lot stronger. I think that's super motivating and keeps you on the same path of like, let me keep this stuff actually works. Let me keep doing this. So, not that that's like a muscle building tip, but sometimes you got to test where your strength's at. And then it gives you confidence also to bump up your starting weights because you're like, I just added, 50 pounds to my max. I got to start, 15 pounds heavier than I usually start on this exercise.
Yep. All right. Last training, like in the gym training principle, I'd say that's huge for muscle growth is volume. There is pretty much a direct correlation between how much volume you do per muscle group and how much hypertrophic effect there is. You got to train it a lot, whether that's a lot of chest on one day or a decent amount of chest on multiple days a week. Just total volume is kind of like a must have recipe for muscle growth. You're not going to get, even if you train it really hard with good tempo and good stretch, but you only do 5 sets a week, 5 effective sets of chest a week, you're not going to grow your chest much. This is again a generalization, but we're trying to give practical advice here. You got to train something like 20. If you're an untrained lifter, maybe like 15 sets per week. The more trained you are, it's probably got to be more than that, probably north of 20, 25 effective sets per week. And when I say effective, like you're above an RPE 8. a bunch of those sets or at least a handful are at RPE 10. Like you got to have a lot of volume, a lot of effective volume.
Well, and just from a common sense standpoint, like you're telling your body, hey, I need more muscle here because I'm going to do this a lot. And so you're just signaling to your body, I need to grow here. So if you're not causing your body to be stressed, like, oh, I can't, I can't push the loads I'm trying to push currently, you're not going to put on muscle as fast. And so I think like that's something that makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, hey, if you do more of this, your body's gonna be like, oh, I got to be able to be prepared for these movements. One thing I want to ask you, Max, you hear, or I've heard a lot about like junk volume. You kind of touched on it there with, you got to be, a lot of that needs to be 8+ RPE. What are your thoughts on when you're counting a warm up set? When do you start counting those working sets as your volume versus just, junk volume, for lack of a better term?
I like that. Yeah, so I'd say like let's categorize it as two things. Again, it's more complex than this, but you got junk volume, you got effective sets. I'd say an effective set is, maybe we'll say like there's nuance to this. It depends how hard you're going to go on your all out sets. Are you going RP 10? Are you going RP 9? But we'll just say like as a general categorization, it's above 7 RPE. So out of 7 out of 10, or you couldn't get 3 more reps. 3 RIR is a 7 RPE. I'd say that's like starting to be an effective set. And then also out of those effective sets for good hypertrophy, a handful of them, I'm not going to specify a number because I don't know if it's possible to, but a handful of those sets need to be very close to at failure or beyond failure, like doing partial reps. You can do rest pause sets. There's ways to intensify that. You got to balance that with your recovery. The more you push that like true failure or beyond failure type stimulus, the higher the recovery demand. So you got to do kind of everything else right. That proper periodization becomes even more important when you're doing that kind of stuff. Your food and recovery even more important. But yeah, I'd say 20 plus effective sets, so above an RPE 7, you'll definitely start growing. And then if you start getting really smart about the partials and pass failure and balancing all that, you're going to get even more effective.
Yeah. And I will say,
I don't count my warm up sets
yeah, that's
like
that's
they're just
probably good
part of the
practice.
workout. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, I will say, like, you probably want to teeter on the line. Like, obviously, you don't want to overtrain and hurt yourself, but it's pretty hard to do that. So I would teeter on the line of doing too much volume
definitely
instead
for
of
getting
pulling back.
jacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're talking about getting strong, I'd say teeter the other way. Teeter at like being a little conservative. But for getting jacked, yeah, push it.
Try to do
Yeah,
more.
push it.
More is better.
Yeah. So let's like super wrap it all together. Our most practical tips for getting jacks: hit a surplus, but don't guess. Like try and figure out what that truly means for you. That's huge. Like if you're gonna optimize getting jacked, you got to know what you're eating. Are you in a surplus or not? So hit a surplus. Don't guess. Sleep and sleep well. Maybe track your sleep for a couple of weeks. Try and get at least 8 hours a night. Read before bed. No stressful things before bed where you can avoid it. Try and protect that period before sleep. That will really improve the quality of your sleep, help you get more jacked. And then in terms of in the gym, let's say like 20 plus sets per muscle group per week, whether it's in one workout or spread across the week, doesn't matter. That's like all the science. They're just different tools. In fact, you should probably switch it up what you're doing. I enjoy hitting it all in one day more. It's like for me, it's more fun. But right now, look, I'm doing upper, lower, upper, lower. So I'm kind of spreading it out.
Yeah.
So 20 plus effective sets per week. That doesn't include warm-ups. Really focus on tempo. I'd say if you want to be like exaggerate about this, do a whole 6-week program with 4-second eccentrics on everything you're doing and getting a full stretch. Take that motion as deep as you can and do weight that you can do both those things for and progress that weight instead of trying to pick a weight that's, what you've done for 3x10 in the past. Figure out what you can do for 3x10, 4-second eccentric, full range of motion and progress that weight. If you do those 3 things over 6 to 8 week period, guarantee you'll get more jacked.
Yeah. One last thing I'll add to that is there was some general guidelines in there that I think are really good to follow, but you got to fit it into your own schedules. Especially if we're talking about how to spread your volume out throughout the week, Look at how many days you can train and then pick the right training program for that, because whatever you're able to do consistently is going to be, your best lever to pull. This all doesn't matter if you're not hitting your calories consistently, if you're not hitting your workouts consistently, if you're not sleeping consistently. So take a look at a macro look at your life and then zoom into your day to day and plan it out so you get the right plan that works the best for you.
Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw this in here. If you want to get jacked, there's there's really no room for alcohol. It's like the least anabolic thing you can do. So probably leave that out if you're truly looking to get jacked. For it affects everything we just talked about. So I'll throw that in there. I didn't think about that until just now.
It's a fair point. It definitely is.
If you're trying to get jacked, skip the booze.
Booze, catabolic.
Yep. Beating, anabolic.
Boom. Get your books in. Let's end it there.